Hello lovely people, Thyworm here with an extensive beginner build guide for Last Epoch patch 0.8.5. If you enjoy Last Epoch content, consider subscribing, it really helps me out and I'm making a lot of Last Epoch content for you to enjoy. You can find a written guide, this script, on the forum, timestamps are available in the video and the build is available in the Last Epoch build planner. See the description for all of this. However, I strongly advise you to watch the video as I am discussing all sorts of mechanics as well as various options you can choose from. I'm trying to explain the build for beginners or people unfamiliar with shapeshifting in Last Epoch, and I'm doing that in great detail, so it is worth a watch. I leveled this character from scratch and put around 20 hours into it. I don't cheat to make these guides, which means that if I can do it, so can you, and it is an actually honest build guide. I don't use insane gear either. Overall, I'm fairly happy with the result. The bug is level 89 currently, with some room to improve still, and easily clearing 130 corruption right now. I'll go into detail about the build soon, but this is basically a shapeshifter constantly changing forms, summoning a ton of minions. All those minions do poison damage and that is how we function. Some pros about the build: this is actually a very controller friendly build. It has really smooth leveling and progression. Poison is overall still strong. It's a good boss killer because of all the minions and poison, and it has decent survivability. The cons, however, there is poison and minions, and this means that all the loot pretty much drops behind you, so sometimes you'll have to backtrack a little bit. You are a bug and it is ridiculous. And finally, but I want to stress this, performance. It is quite bad. I am running around with maybe 20-30 FPS at times because of the totems and all the minions and poison going on. This game is horribly optimized and this build definitely shows that is the case. Back to the build though, it is a build that's easy to play and easy to learn if you want to, but you can also try to use all the skills optimally, increasing the skill cap quite a bit, which is fun to do, especially in the arena or other more, let's say, static content where you are just being surrounded by a bunch of enemies. You can really sort of hone your skills and try to do your maximum damage possible. Let's start with the build requirements. There are no real requirements for this build to work. I am using two uniques which are very common but are by no means mandatory. The Viper Tail synergizes well with what we do, and Eter's Path is a great option too, but once again not required at all. Then the build philosophy. I wanted to make a hybrid poison build, combining the Swarmblade Form, which I will refer to as Bug Form from now on, and the Spriggan Form. They synergize extremely well. It's a lot of fun, it's a lot of minions, it's a lot of poison, and it is a lot of healing too. Up to at least 130 corruption, you will have no issues clearing the content, and with additional investment, you can push it even further. The idea of this build is to make use of the transformation between Bug Form and Spriggan Form. While we make that transition, we gain additional buffs, additional bugs, and more minions to flood the screen with poison-inducing threats, killing both enemies and our frame rate. We can do this rotation endlessly and spawn endless minions doing endless damage. It is a very active playstyle, a lot of fun, and it's also very effective. We're using more innate abilities that synergize well with these forms, like Serpent Strike to deal poison damage ourselves, and we are summoning both Thorn and healing totems. Defenses are coming from a decent health pool, aspect of the boar in late game, and overall tanky stats on druids. Every time we shift, we heal ourselves to full completely, which helps a lot. Finally, the build definitely has a few versions you can try out, and I will discuss some of the different things I tried and some of the options you have. That'll be done mainly in the skills section. So what do you need in terms of stats? Here is the wish list. In terms of defenses, make sure you get res capped of course and get 100% crit avoidance. As soon as you get into the second island of the Monolith, the second timeline, it is really mandatory, I would say. Early on, you can use the Woven Flesh for easy crit avoidance. It drops from the Abomination in the first timeline. Later, in the passive tree, we scale crit avoidance because of attunement. The blessings in the Monolith can help a lot here too, as well as idols. Furthermore, you want health, some dodge and some endurance. basically whatever else you can get. In terms of offense, this build scales really well with attunement. We get crit avoidance from it and generic damage for our skills. You want to get minion chance to poison on hit, so they start stacking up those poison stacks, minion damage over time, and minion poison damage is great as well. I would suggest some cast speed too for quality of life. Without it, the build can feel sluggish. The same is true for attack speed, although you are not attacking that often, especially in late game. I would prioritize minion damage over time over your own damage over time, because you will not be doing the heavy lifting most of the time. That's it, honestly. You don't have to be concerned with minion health or minion defenses, as they're all temporary minions that don't last long anyway. This saves up a lot of room for other affixes on gear. You don't care about mana because we don't use mana, and the rage we use is irrelevant because we are swapping forms all the time. And whenever you swap a form, you gain a full rage bar again. Let's look at the skill specializations and the skills that we're using. I will not discuss each and every point invested, but instead focus on the most important nodes. You can see everything in the build planner yourself. I will get more into the leveling in the leveling section, but most of these skills are late game skills. I just took the skills as they became available, and in that order I will discuss them here, starting with Summon Thorn Totem. While leveling, I would head first into the poison nodes, because you won't have the mana most likely to sustain the north part. Venom-tipped thorns and lasting affliction are the main reason our totems are effective. Rotten core makes the totems explode on death, adding one more poison stack to everyone surrounding them. And it is all about stacking poison after all. Then you travel north to Forested Expanse, 3 points in Eternal Forest, and finally Grove Mind, summoning all totems at once. You will not self-cast this, but either proc these totems via an idol or via the Spriggan Form tree, which is what I did in the end. I'm not really gonna go into these idols, but these idols exist that basically give you a chance on hit to summon a Thorn totem, and this can be a very viable way to proc these totems if you want to. Then Serpent Strike, a great leveling skill. Just make sure you got a spear, otherwise the skill doesn't work. I first went to the right, Nagasa Venom for poison chance. Please note that the skill itself already has 140% poison chance if you cast this yourself and if you directly use this skill. This is important later down the line, so remember this. As soon as you got the poison chance, I go to Spear Flurry for 20% attack speed. Then I take Scorpion Strikes for global poison damage. And finally 3 out of 3 debilitating poison to blind our enemies. That is just a little bit of defense here, blinding them. You could path a bit differently though as well, for example not taking the global poison damage, but instead go to Blood Flurry for even faster attack speed, meaning more poison stacks, or Culling Point for a kill threshold. That is a personal consideration. I feel poison does enough damage as it is, and I'm not using this skill that much in endgame, but there are some options here for sure, so feel free to experiment. On to Spriggan Form. As soon as you get this, your build gets a lot more interesting. The true synergy doesn't kick in until much later, but you can already walk around, summon poison vines, and from this moment it is very smooth sailing. I first went to Nightshade because your first priority is to make sure your minions stack poison. Then I took 3 points in Creeping Underbrush, which is debatable, but there you go. You take Blade of the Forest, which allows you to swap from Spriggan Form to Bug Form. I'm going to explain this mechanic in the playstyle section and show you exactly how it works. We take 4 points in Totem Warden for the healing and the summoning speed. This 60% summoning speed of totems is a huge quality of life feature. Then you go Spiked Totems, and this enables you to use the entire skill tree of Thorn totems on your healing totems. If you cast healing totems with Spriggan Form, you are basically casting Thorn totems. These are healing totems that heal but otherwise act like Thorn totems. This is also going to come in handy later, so pay attention. Finally, we path towards Leaf Barrier for a whole bunch of ward when shifting, and Friend of the Forest to give us an additional Spriggan companion whenever we are in Spriggan Form, which is cool because we're speccing into Summon Spriggan and it uses that skill tree. You don't have to do this, however. I do it because I like the healing of the Spriggans, but you can skip these 5 points and just invest more in Poison Vine damage. That might be the optimal play here, but I like fun in my builds and not optimal play. and the Spriggans are decent quality of life as well. This brings us neatly to summon Spriggan. This is the only companion we have, and you could argue it is not the best choice. At level 89, you spend enough points in Beastmaster to unlock the Scorpion, which might be the superior choice here in terms of damage. I am keeping the bug Spriggan theme alive though, and I went with this. First, I made sure my Spriggan start casting more vines, which are additional to the vines that you cast in your own Spriggan form. Take Deadly Thicket, so they deal more damage. Take Vine Mastery, so she summons them more often, and take Forest Razor, so she summons 3 at once. Then we make sure she heals us with Aura of Life. The Spriggan can give us dodge as well with Aura of Evasion, 4 dodge per attunement. You should be stacking attunement, meaning you get quite some dodge from this node. Finally, for some survivability on the Spriggan itself, you give it Arboreal Vitality. I experimented a bit with Entangling Roots and the healing route over there, but it was a bit overkill as I have so much healing already. Maybe for a zoo build this is a decent route, but in my build it was a bit too much. Finally, bug form. I'm taking Wasp Flight for quality of life. Having high attack and cast speed makes the build feel a lot better. You summon the hives with locusts much faster. I think it makes a lot of sense. I take Feverous Stings, primarily for the locust poison chance. They're coming out of these hives, it's very nice. And speaking of these hives, Grand Colony adds 4 locusts per hive and Hive Mind adds 2 hives, bringing the total number of locusts from 4 hives up to 48 locusts potentially. You won't reach 48, but it is not uncommon to have 40 locusts on the screen. I added 12 bees as well for the memes using idols, but ultimately stepped away from that. You do all of this to get to Swarmkeeper's Call, which you want to rush, by the way. This changes you back from bug into Spriggan form. Once again, in the playstyle section I will fully explain the rotation. Don't forget to take Viper's Call along the way somewhere, which makes you use the skill tree of Serpent Strike when you use Armblade Slash, which is basically your regular attack in bug form. This clearly synergizes well with Serpent Strike and you can start applying poison yourself. There are a few things to consider, however. First of all, the implicits from Serpent Strike don't work anymore, which means the inherent 140% poison chance and 40% poison duration. Everything else, however, does work, so the attack speed, the blinding, the global poison damage, so it's definitely worth it. Another thing to consider is that it is not mandatory to use a spear anymore. You can use any weapon now in the Swarmblade form, meaning you could even go with a one-handed weapon and a shield, for example, if you think you need more defenses, and still apply Serpent Strike using the Armblade Slashes. You could consider in endgame to spec out of Serpent Strike, just decide not to attack anymore yourself at all, don't take this point, and replace Serpent Strike for a Scorpion Companion or something. That would be a viable route because you will start noticing that the harder endgame gets, the less you're willing to be in melee range, slashing away. And by this time you have so many minions, it really doesn't matter or add too much anymore if you apply additional stacks. Once again, this is up to you. Finally, I am taking Slashing Spiral for some more area of effect of the locusts, so they hit more enemies and they poison more enemies. This is primarily useful for clearing maps. Normally I explained playstyle at the end, but let's talk about it now that we have the skills fresh in our mind. So here's the build in action. The whole idea of this build is that you keep swapping over and over again between bug form and Spriggan form. I personally always start with Spriggan form. Here is how it works. In order to successfully swap between the two forms and not just return to human form, you need to do 2 things. First, don't run out of rage, which you shouldn't, and second, make sure you meet the prerequisite for the swap, because if you don't, you just swap back to human form, and you may be in trouble because the human form is the weakest form, as we all know. The flesh is weak and all. This prerequisite in Spriggan form is that you have casted Poisonous Vines. You need to cast Poisonous Vines first before you hit the button again to transform to bug form, because otherwise it doesn't work, it takes you back to human form. This works nicely with what you are supposed to do in Spriggan form anyway, which is really only 2 things. Number 1, summon a bunch of vines targeted at the enemy, the maximum vines is 12. And 2. Summon your healing totem, which is a healing totem that works like a thorn totem, remember? So you summon 5 of them at once and they all shoot thorns. This costs loads of rage, but you should have enough as you are fairly high level at this point. The Spriggan has more abilities than this, but we're not bothered with those. Once you've done this, you hit the transform button. As soon as you hit the transform button, a few things happen. Number 1, your 2 nearest vines are transformed into hives, which spawn the locusts. Number 2, you enter bug form. And number 3, upon entering bug form, you automatically cast Swarm Strike. Now, this isn't an ability that we really discussed, but what this does is consume any locusts around you and turn them into this massive AoE damage over time effect. Because we are a damage over time build, this ability does quite some damage because of our scaling. So if you want to min-max your damage, you should make sure that you transform from Spriggan to Bug once you are surrounded by locusts. And don't worry, these locusts are coming back soon enough. You are starting with 2 hives after all and you're planting more soon. Which brings us to the bug form. You should really only do one thing in here, and you have some optional options as well. The only thing you need to do is cast hives to spawn locusts. What you can do is use the dive ability, which is a short dash, and you can use Armblade Slash, which is basically Serpent Strike now, to add poison damage. As soon as you can, however, transform back into Spriggan Form. And once you do, 3 things happen. 1. It transforms remaining locusts in the hives into healing totems. This is why you need to cast hives, because there should be locusts remaining in them so you can turn those into healing totems. And once again, these are the healing totems with Thorn totem skill trees on them, meaning they heal and do loads of poison damage. The maximum additional totems you can get from this conversion is 5, meaning you can summon an additional 5 yourself, which we do by following what I just told you earlier, casting healing totem. In total, you can have around 9 or 10 healing totems at the same time active using these strategies. 2. You enter Spriggan Form. And 3. Upon entering Spriggan Form, you automatically cast Thorn Shield. Don't worry about it, it's not important, but now you know where it comes from. This is the rotation. From here on, it is just rinse and repeat. What really helps is to arrange the skills in the different forms so they are easily accessible to you on the hotbar. I keep Summon Hives and Summon Vines on the same key. I keep the Transformation skill on the same key, etc. It takes a bit of practice, but you will be a master shapeshifter in no time. Time to look at the passives. I will just highlight a few interesting decisions, as most of this is rather straightforward given what I've already told you before. In the base tree, take Natural Attunement because attunement is good, Primal Medicine is decent for minion damage, Hunter's Restoration gives 10% health, which is good, and the final point is in Hunter's Emanation, but it can go anywhere. Then you fill up the Druid tree, so far 57 points. I take Chitinous Plating for some tankiness, Druidic Prowess for attunement, and the bonus is nice too. If you're unfamiliar with this new Druid tree, you need to spend the required points in the passives and then you get the bonus. Claws of the Forest is a no-brainer, poison damage. Wind in the Leaves is important for quality of life, and minion attack speed is really good because it means they apply their poison stacks faster. Harmonious Wisdom, more attunement. You take 4 points in Woodland Beings because you need to get to Toxic Reach. You should take this node and fill it up as soon as you can. 60% minion poison chance is nuts. This is a great node. And finally, I am taking Primal Shifter because we are shifting a lot between forms and it gives you a 50% armor and damage buff for 8 seconds. Reincarnation, 5 points, then heals you as well for 500 health when you change forms, which is really great. You could consider not taking that 500 healing and take 1 point less in Primal Shifter to spend those 6 points you just gained into Piercing Gale. In itself, the passive isn't great, but the bonus, 15% locust attack and cast speed, that is really good for damage. If you feel that you don't need the healing because you got a lot of that going on already, you could take this instead. I then went into the Shaman tree after completing the Druid tree. This is mostly quality of life. 4 points in Shamanic Infusion for attunement, and then we path towards Totemic Fury, 25% attack and cast speed if you have an active totem. We are both attacking and casting in all of the forms, and there is always a totem up somewhere, so these are really great quality of life nodes. I highly recommend them, and if the build feels sluggish, maybe you should go here first and delay the druid tree a little bit. It makes a big difference. Finally, Beastmaster tree. This is purely defensive. Ursine strength, because strength is armor and 16% less damage taken is very nice. Aspect of the boar is just mandatory on any druid, I feel. 15% reduced damage taken for 5 seconds when you're being hit, that is a lot. Then you spend 2 random points, and should you level all the way to 100 with this, which is definitely fun and viable, you should take also Porcine Constitution, granting another 15% damage reduction on the buff for a total of 30% damage reduction. That would mean you have 6 points left to reach level 100, which once again I would then put in the druid tree in Piercing Gale. Then also very important, gear. As per usual, my gear is okay. Increased minion damage over time on the two-hander is worth a lot in my opinion. It is a big damage boost. The Viper Tail is a nice unique for this build. I turned it into a great legendary. Iterra's Path with additional movement speed is great too, of course. Lucky Craft, 25% chance, but it happened. And the rest of the gear just focuses on defenses, health, minion damage and a bit of crit avoidance. You can see all the gear in the build planner. For idols, you have a lot of options really. You can meme around with bees, although those idols are very rare. You can definitely see them in the footage. I think it's fun, but ultimately not sure if it's worth it, and I didn't include it in the guide after all. I went for resistances while transformed instead, because we are always transformed. Aspect of the boar duration is a common idol and it's very nice defensively. Chance to poison on minion hit is probably the best thing you can get, but it is pretty rare. Crit avoidance is an option, and minion melee attack speed helps too, as locusts, vines and bees do melee damage. For blessings, I am pretty much taking all the resistance blessings because I don't want to deal with resistances. It's really nothing special, just check the builder. I created a loot filter for you guys from scratch. Big warning, use this at your own risk. I'm not responsible for you missing any loot, okay? Also, I like strict loot filters, so at higher levels you will see very few items dropping. That is fine, I feel, for me at least. Let me walk you through it, however. I recolored idols for you with affixes that you want. I made flashy green all the affixes that give you levels for the skills you are using, like Spriggan Form. Then there are hide rules, which kick in at higher levels, making sure no low-level weapons drop anymore. Use at your own risk. The loot filter shows normal items till level 10. It hides all boots without movement speed. It hides all 9 primalist gear. It hides all weapons that don't have minion damage on it, except spears, because you need spears for Serpent Strike while leveling. And then there are more colors for all of your other loot, starting at the bottom with yellow and gradually getting stricter all the way to purple. At some point I put a level cap on those rules, so yellow items will show up until a certain character level, I think it's level 35, and then they don't show up anymore. I created this while leveling, so in that sense I know it is working. And you can use this filter to be able to farm your way towards decent gear, but I may have missed a thing or two. Once again, use at your own risk. I got most of my gear using this filter, however, also during leveling. Talking about leveling, it is super easy, barely an inconvenience. The very start is a bit wonky with Thorn totems, but as soon as you have Serpent Strike it gets much better. In the meantime, I just took wolves for some extra damage until you can ditch them later. You just take the skill in order they arrive, and it is really smooth sailing, honestly. I was quite surprised by how smooth this was. Let's talk some Monolith Modifiers. Generally, the only thing I would really avoid is giving enemies dodge, because poisons apply their damage based on a hit. So if you don't hit, you don't apply a poison stack. Everything else is basically completely fine, which makes this build strong as well. I had a lot of fun creating this build, all the way from scratch to finish. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, toss a sub to the channel, because I create more extensive guides like this. And finally, thanks for watching. See you soon, love you all, bye bye.